So the following podcast comes from the Embodiment Conference about 2 years ago now. So it was a really great conference, by far the biggest of its kind, 1,000 speakers, about 500,000 people attending. It was at a really delicate time with COVID and various other things happening in the world. And we just think it was a huge gift to the world. The whole team worked incredibly hard to put the conference on. We've decided that it's really good to share some of the sessions from the conference to everyone. So we put a few of them out on a podcast. So here's one of those. So if you hear references, it sound like that big day, that's where it's from. And we think the content still really stands up. So enjoy this session.
So at the conference today, a treat to absolute legends. We have Dr. Don Hanlon Johnson from the California Institute of Integral Studies, who started the Somatic psychology program and doctorate there. You get that right?
Mm-hmm.
And Bainbridge Cohen. So movement artist, researcher, educator, therapist, and founder of Body Mind Centering together in one place. Two legends and elders. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
These two are old friends. So maybe let's just have a little bit of biographical. Where does it begin for you? What sparked your interest in the body? Bonnie, you have a very interesting life story.
My parents were with the Ringling Brother, Barnum and Bailey Circus. And my mother was a dancer before that, and during that and after. And so when she was pregnant, I suspect she moved a lot, because she said I danced in the womb, very active. I was also born with fetal alcohol syndrome. That was very common in drinking, smoking, and coffee. It was her diet. So I feel that created that sensitivity we talked about earlier. And how does one live with a sensitivity that is just in your earliest cellular memory? And how to glean the gift of it within the curse of it. So one of the things that I feel is that I'm not afraid of people's stories.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking earlier, I don't like to read, I did younger, but I don't like to read stories about violence, or trauma is big these days as a label, because I feel I have my own stories, and I've heard so many stories that are real, in which I can be part of. And to read a story in which I have no relationship to, I can just read the story, is too much. But if someone has a real story, then I can engage with them. And also, we often will label something as being a problem, or that, oh, that poor person, or such bad whatever trauma, that can we not waste it? We don't want to create it, but can we not waste what we suffer? And find the inner power of it, and love, which I read in your book so beautifully over the last few days. So that's in my cells. So when people say, can you move from your cells? Or that's, I remember we had a meeting once, Dawn and I were there, and I was talking about cellular breathing. And one of the participants said, do you mean the cells can recognize each other and know what's going on? And I was kind of dumbfounded at the moment. And you came in, and I will always remember and be grateful. You said, that is the question. Perfect. in your Don way. And then people will say, was it a metaphor? And I say, it is. If you don't feel it, it's a metaphor. And that's fine. That's what you feel. But if you feel it, then it's reality. Both are real. And there's not one that's better than the other. And often we will begin with metaphor. So thank God we have a cortex and a frontal lobe and imagery. And then how that cortical thinking can arrive at wherever the metaphor and the image. But then how do we let go once we found the place to receive what's there? And it's an awareness act, not a motor act. So awareness is a motor act. We usually say sensory and motor, but the awareness is more than sensation. It's a motor act because it brings forth whatever is there. So I went more than history, but I would like to say another thing, so history, otherwise I'll forget, that again I was apparently 3 times nearly died my first year, so I feel like that created a bridge for me between life and death at a, talking about pre-level, pre-verbal level, but even a pre-identity level. And then when I was 4, I had polio, which paralyzed my spine for 2 months. So I learned quietude. I'm saying this because you said that many people will come to this conference. And of course we don't want people to suffer, but we do. And that quietude is so powerful. The other things, but I'll go forward because it's a body-mind kind of thing. That I broke my arm when I was 10 and I couldn't use it for 2 years, and it was like this as a child. Now I can open it, not all the way, I don't have full sensation. But I know a path. And when I was 21, I was working in a hospital as an occupational therapist. I was actually interning. And a man had a stroke and he couldn't use, I don't remember now, I think it was his severe left paralysis at right brain. Stroke. And in those days, this would have been 1963, he had his arm in a sling because it was sublux, very low tone, which happens, and then usually it becomes high tone later. And as an occupational therapist, I was told that I should help him become one-handed. But of course he didn't want to be one-handed. He was probably quite a bit younger than I am now, in his 60s, and businessman and had been successful. So I took his arm out of the sling and I held it. And if you had put a piece of beef in my hand, it would have felt the same. I didn't know what I was holding. And I vowed that someday I would know what was in my hands. And I'm very good at that today. I don't know ahead of time because it didn't happen yet. So I'm not imposing what I know into what I feel. But that man, I didn't waste his suffering. So those are, then I could go further, but I'm bringing that out, something that I think your book, actually, you were talking about trauma quite a bit, and I'm in conferences a few times where this is a main topic, and I'm glad it's a main topic, that we're looking at trauma. But I'd like to add that as long as we have it, let's find the gift of it, as well as the deep suffering that we all have. And I'll say one other thing in regards to that. There was a woman in the late 80s, I think, no, maybe 1990. We were at the end of a training, and she went disassociated in one of the last seminars before she left the program. And I could be with her until a point, and I realized I can't follow her any further. So I said to her, this is the extent of my experience. I can't follow you any further. You'll have to come back. You can explore it further another time, but not with me, because I can't help you. I can't accompany you. So she came back into her body, and she said, I never knew that I could come back.
Bonnie, this is just huge riches already. There's so many topics I'd love to go more into. And I'd love to bring Don in a little bit. Don, is there anything that you can bounce off there that introduces yourself and your own background?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that what's emerged a lot for me lately, particularly as I get older, and all my friends are dying and all that, is thinking more through what you talked about, trauma. And I realized that I just feel so lucky I stumbled into all of you because my beginning was so bad. My birth was horrendous. I was premature because the doctor was going on vacation, and then my mother had cesarean, which was an emergency cesarean, and as she told me laughingly when Hannah was about to be born, it was just kind of weird the way they put you in a nursery and they put you on a schedule. They would bring you in every 3 hours to get nursed, and it seemed like you didn't quite like it very much. And so I started out, and then my spine was fused from the beginning, and so I had no spinal movement, and then my whole childhood was riddled with sickness and dysfunction and so forth. And I have chronic pain my whole life, and blah, 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 blah. And then on top of that, of course, I fell off a cliff, 8 years ago, and broke my neck and all my ribs. And last year I almost died with 5 months of pneumonia. So, in fact, the last time I saw you, you were helping me with that mess. So, and yet here I am.
Skiing.
Skiing, yeah, I've been skiing, cross-country skiing. So, it's like you say, and the thing that's striking to me is once you scratch the surface, everybody is in this stage. And the worst thing is when people argue about whose suffering's worse. And I've thought a lot about in later years about how much better the world would be if we could just all say, it's been really hard being human beings, wherever you happen to be. Let's just settle together as a community of suffering and see how we can make it, what was the phrase you used a minute ago? Make it pay off or something? You had a really interesting phrase about the trauma, that we don't waste the trauma. That's a really good phrase. That somehow that we realize that life is suffering. I mean, the Buddhists say it their way and the Christians say it their way and so forth, but it's true. It's like, it's not just a sort of spiritual teaching, it's really there, but we fight so hard to not acknowledge that piece of it. So I think this focus on reaping the benefits of our trauma. So when I broke my neck and all my ribs, I said, I've got to take myself seriously here. So it really made me get much more serious about all the things I know from all of our friends and teachers and stuff about breathing and exercising and stuff. And then when I had the pneumonia, I just really upped the ante of recovering my lungs, which is partly why I went skiing, So that's kind of one of the thoughts I have. And I did want to say that one of the things I've also reflected a lot lately, and it's a huge difference between you and me, which is why I think that we make a good couple, is my life there's a beautiful sense of order about my life. I've recently done, in the last year or so, a lot of research in ancestry and all that. And I know all of my great-grandparents. I know a lot about them. I know where they were born. I know, and each generation of all of my great-grandparents slowly built a better world for those of us who came after. So now there are these 5 generations from them down to my granddaughter that it's totally predictable, safe, supportive, and a level of stifling quality to it that I had to get away from. So even though I so much appreciate the order and containment in my life, and like my grandfather built the house my father grew up in, and my father built the house that I grew up in, and there was this, and my grandfather built a cradle that now all of our kids have been raised in, that I appreciate that, and the wildness of the human spirit was missing. It was also too tame and contained and orderly. And so, but how to do that in a way that's meaningful, not just Tim Leary style, is the issue. And you and Emily are examples to me of such wildness of the human spirit, but in a creative mold that allows it to proliferate in a beautiful way. So
Emily Conrad.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
I'm very proud. One of the great achievements of my life is to bring the 2 of them together.
Wonderful. If you want to see another wonderful interview on YouTube, that was part of my prep for this, was watching that beautiful interview. Yeah, so we've got a couple of deep themes, I think, already here. So the kind of existential, the early, difficult early things, polio, fetal alcohol syndrome in your case, the circus as well, the high wire and your mother racing, standing on top of horses, and gangsters and people trying to kill her or being around. Like, I've heard some of these stories. I mean, this is like a whole, the first few years of your life is a wild film right there. And also at the end of life, like you falling off a cliff and, pneumonia, and we, just in terms of ages, you're 80...
I'll be 86 in a couple of weeks.
86 in a couple of weeks, and 78, got that right? So kind of the beginning of life, difficult, the last act of life, if I may say, not necessarily easiest, particularly for yourself, and the whole life's work in the middle. I do want to come to that. So it feels like that's a theme here.
It does feel easier to me now than ever.
Easier than ever?
Yeah.
Say more?
Well, I feel good, basically. I have pains and stuff, but I don't care. Because my life is great. All my friends and my home and my family, and I'm happy.
You just become a grandfather.
Yeah.
One of the great joys.
So, no, I feel more chronically happy than I was.
Chronically happy.
The rest of my life. Chronically, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Bonnie, for me, you've always had this, like, otherworldly quality a little bit, and I wasn't sure if it was, you had this, sometimes a cat has this, like that quality of, like you're a mystic as well as an embodiment teacher. Is that fair to say?
I love knowing the answers to your questions.
Or there's a difficulty in the same way as in the mystic, it's what we can't put into words. There's a way in which sometimes your somatic work, I find it hard to describe to people, or hard to get my own head around. I was on the way here, and someone said, "Who's this person you're interviewing?" I said, "Oh, she's called Bainbridge Cohen. She's a founder of Body Mind Centering." And they said, "What's that? Can you just tell me in a couple of sentences?" I said, "No, I can't. I can't tell you in a couple of sentences." And my whole thing is being really clear about embodiment. That's kind of my shtick. So it's sort of infuriating and wonderful and mystical at the same time. How would you respond to that?
I give them my card and I say, if you go to bodymindcentering.com, you can learn something about it.
You and Joe Biden. Go to my website.
Or if Len is available, my husband, I'll say, you're on, Len. And why I don't usually do interviews, because I don't know what I do. I'm very good at it. And if you give me the problem or the celebration, whatever it is, or just something simple, I know I can engage. But about something, I don't start with the words. The words come from the experience. So there has to be an experience in order for there to be words. Otherwise, it's a memory. And I don't have a very good memory anymore.
I remember a time in London, it was maybe 6-7 years ago, I went to a workshop of yours, introductory thing, and I wasn't getting it. And my clever brain was like, but I don't understand. And I asked the question and I was kind of frustrated. And you said, come here. And you kind of touched me and you hugged me and you sort of showed me with the body, and you gave me an experience of the thing you were teaching. And I was something about being yin or absorbing. And I went, oh, my whole system changed. I've got a body memory of it. And I went, oh, thank you.
That's exactly what happened to me. Yeah, I didn't understand all of your stuff. And then you said, now I'm touching your cells, now I'm touching your whatever. You went through all of these. It was the touch that made me understand you.
And after that, people said, what's this Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen like? And I said, well, I don't really know what she does, but she's a genius. She's absolutely amazing. She's genius. Just from that one 3-second experience kind of thing. And I think though, for listeners, maybe let's map out a little bit some of the areas you work in. So
maybe I could say something about that would help, because I can speak very clearly about that experience because you were so clear. Your work, if I can be so bold as to try to describe it, the core, one of the cores of it to me is the mind of the cells, that whole teaching. So the way that comes through, you said, now I'm in my bones touching your bones. Now I'm in your respiratory system touching yours. Now I'm in the cerebrospinous fluid. So Bonnie can go to a consciousness of one region of the body and embody that consciousness, which evokes it in me. So that enables her, that discernment that you've done so amazingly over the years to refine, makes it possible for you to meet someone where they're needy, where they really need some help. Like, for example, with myself, it was a revelatory experience for me to experience my fluids in the way, because I would put it in your language that I was very much identified in bones, muscles, but I didn't have this fluid consciousness, which was such a big thing for me to find with you and then the osteopaths. I think this discernment of where I'm meeting the person, by which experience of my own infinite capacities that I'm zeroing in on, is the capacity that you've really refined over the years.
They could only be refined in community. So I also want to mention that whatever body-mind centering is, it's community-based. And that's super important to me. It's like one of the things that I've said about her in public is that you are the systems teacher in Somatics, so that all these little churches go on. Who's better? You want to go to this person, and they're better than this. And Ida Rolf, you say, don't go to Feldenkrais, don't go to Alexander. And Alexander say, don't go near Ida Rolf, and blah, blah, blah. This way that Bonnie's had of saying that each cell has its own mind opens up the possibility for many, many methods where people will focus just on the bony body or the joint body or whatever they're doing. And so it gives us a framework. Your framework enables us to see how all of these people are part of our community. Community without one, you're leaving out something really important. So I think it's really a generous framework that you provided for us to make sense of that. Like Emily forever would say, I don't want anything to do with the muscles and bones, it's ruining the culture of the muscle and bones, I don't care about them. Then now she, in her last years, because of you and me, she started to say, oh, bones aren't so bad, muscles are pretty good things. And she developed the Explore board and all that. I remember Emily Conrad, our first, I think it was our first public presentation, because we had more private ones that Don set up. And I have to pause for a minute because I had a moment of missing her.
Yeah, me too.
She presented first at Esalen, and she presented her, there's no word, just her Emily way. And I don't know the words, but it was like about this being presence, and not about bones, not about other things, just this existing in oneself. And then it was my turn, and Emily was so expressive. And then it was my turn, and I said, well, I actually look at the bones and the muscles or whatever in my more quiet way. And then that reminds me of once we were together at Omega, and the person ahead of the publicity or whatever, he wanted to interview the group of us. Dean Juhan was there, I think, and anyway, another man. Okay. And they want us to talk about ourselves, and I said, well, I don't really want to talk about me. I'll talk about you, says Emily. So I could be there. I didn't say a thing, and they never posted because I think it looked rather foolish. I think I was holding somebody's foot. And but she was just present to do whatever. She says, I'll talk about you. I said, oh, thank you.
And your presence was, I was asking people on the Facebook community for the conference ahead of this, like, what should I ask? And maybe share some stories about you. And your presence was something that people mentioned a lot. You know, I was just talking about my own mentor, Paul Linden, earlier, and saying one of the main reasons that I apprenticed with him was his loving presence. Mm-hmm. And this is this thing that keeps coming up when I mention your name, is your presence with people. Mm-hmm. So yes, there's the systems work, there's the embryological work, the developmental work, these different parts. And what sticks in people's mind, the memory often seems to be presence. Mm-hmm. Can you say a little bit about that?
I think it comes from not knowing anything. Like, it seems like I think and know a lot, but I actually don't. At the level of one's knowing. That doesn't make sense. But I don't have thoughts running around in my head.
Okay. So like, I'm interviewing you now and I'm going, oh, maybe I'll say this next and this sort of normal mental process. You don't have that so much? It's just a sort of...
No, mine is like, what I say is, it's for me, it's all a prayer. And it's not about praying, there's that calling. It's like, it's not a particular, I have both a Jewish and Quaker background. And some Southern Baptist growing up in the South. It's not about a particular form. It's about...
This may be a good place to talk about the granddaughter. Because I think of when I hold Undine in my lap, and she's just there with me. She's just there. And I realize how chattery I am. And it's embarrassing. So that's where it's like to be with a Rinpoche, because I'm sitting there and here is this being that's just present with me. I just got to quiet down here. And I experienced that with you. That just sort of comes to you however you got there. Whereas with the Undine's a developmental kind of thing that's just kind of amazing to and not easy for me because of my own chattery thing, which is not at all the way you are.
That's why I need you here, because I need the chatter. also I've spent so much of my adult life with babies.
Uh-huh.
And so I feel they have been my major teachers. I mean, we have maybe hundreds or thousands of hours of my working with babies or children with developmental challenges, and they're deteriorating. So I'll put a plug in here if anyone has finances to support their ventral production. I think it would be great. I think they would be a great source, because I have one video for special children, which was from 85, I think, or 87. When you see them, these are children with real differences. And you see them change in a few minutes. The sessions were probably an hour long. I cut it down to half an hour to cut out some of the chatter around it. It's so profound. I thought, my God, if they can do this and they're considered disabled, what am I doing here with all the possibilities that I have? They're so beautiful. And the little ones, and I'm thinking when Tano, when your son was a baby, we...
Yeah, he's just 4 months old or so, yeah. They were, Len and Bonnie were working on my son at this huge conference in Washington, D.C. in the foyer of this big auditorium. And so they were lying on the ground with him, working with him. And the doors opened and 2,000 people came walking out over the top with the three of them out there.
Just to clarify the request, because this is going out to quite a lot of people. You want someone to help with the production of the old videos that you have of you working with children with special needs,
Yeah.
to help make
They
that
go
into a
back
modern
to the
format.
80s. They actually started in reel-to-reel, and then we went to VHS, and each, for example, the one major one that I did get permission, we would get permissions from parents, was a boy. I think he was 6. I think it was 1985 or 87. And he drowned when he was 2, but he survived. But he was in this state. And they had done a method with him where you do a lot of patterning with people moving his body and stuff. And somehow through that, because you had many people to help with that, they discovered that I was living in Massachusetts. I don't think they were from, I'm not sure if they were from Massachusetts. Anyway, they brought him, and he was really frozen in that moment 4 years later. And I asked them, was he verbal? He was very verbal, so I thought, great. First of all, I didn't think great, because I didn't think. That's what's hard to describe, but I heard. And I asked them, did he ever suck his thumb or anything? What did he like? He said, yes, he sucked his thumb. So in this video, I'm singing with him and playing with him, and all of a sudden, I don't remember what we were doing, but I was moving him, but talking to him, and I said, where's your thumb? And he looks. And it was the first automatic response he'd had since he drowned. I happened to have a health issue right after that, so I never saw him again. I don't know. But that kind of thing, where like a person will bring a baby to me, I probably have this on film too, and the baby's 4 months old maybe, crying all the time, not settling, colicky, fine otherwise. I mean, a baby, he'll be fine growing up. Excuse me. And he's crying, and to me that's like, whoa. I played with him. He's crying. I said, "Tell me your story. What's going on? You know, you really had a hard time." Looks up. And by the end, and his mother said, he finally came into this world, into his body. Like, listen, the baby's crying. Don't say nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong with you. You're suffering because your child's crying. Of course something's going on, but... And this one baby that, not baby, 6-year-old, another 6-year-old, who they thought was very severely neurologically challenged, seizures all the time and not able to do any, what's the word, intentional. And this thing, he gets very angry at me because he was also from this method of moving him. I wouldn't move him, what did he want to do? And so they didn't know if he was blind or not. And at the end you see he's not blind, or he has the potential to see. Because it's an engagement, a meeting with, you meet they're not somewhere else. Kids that are adults too. I've worked with adults in coma, whatever. And we meet. A very, very good friend recently had a stroke, a couple years, and is very limited, and has had different kinds of work, and I don't know if I want to say any, refer name, but somebody who does BMC for many, many years went to see her and worked internally, not trying to get her to do anything, but worked internally and this person who was working with her didn't know her, they didn't know each other, and of course she wanted him to know that this wasn't who she was, right? She was a dynamic individual, wonderful woman, and so I said, tell her that her cells know everything still, but they lost the connection to her brain. And that, so we just have to build up the connections again so that the cells can feed the brain instead of the brain telling the body. And at the end of that session, she said to this person who was working with her, "I feel both my legs." That's the beginning, to feel both your legs. She says, people have been asking me to do things that I can't do. Today I feel my both legs. So it's this cellular knowing, and it is a practice. It is a practice. It's a very deep practice.
I don't want a point you made to get lost, because I think it's a huge one that's forgotten. That early on, when she said a lot of for you has been about community. I think this is a real failure in the somatics field work. There's a lot of emphasis on, I've got this technique that can really help your intestines, and then I do this thing on you. And Ida was that way a lot. I felt, in retrospect, we never, in the teaching, we never were...
Ida Rolf, yeah.
Yeah, we were never taught to, who are we touching? Who are we communicating with? Does this person even want to be touched? So I think I think we've all embodied that, you and Robert and Emily and all of our friends, we've developed our intimacy with each other. And that reflects in the work. So I think of Robert's community, Robert Hall, who just died not too long ago, and Emily. They were communities of love. They were communities of caring and friendship. And that I feel that really needs to be embodied in the teaching. I'm sure you, like me, just see these endless things about people are buying into some kind of exotic fixed thing that's then very marketed, and and people give away their being to this. So I think this emphasis you put on how do we develop presence So one of my first teachers that opened my world was Carl Rogers. But I couldn't do what he did. I couldn't sit and just be with people. I had to kind of get into all my cells so I could be there. Yeah. But I don't want to miss that point of it. I think that's so important in all of this.
Yeah, the community.
The community part of it is really, really important. Yeah, like we had a doctoral presentation yesterday by an extraordinary woman who did her doctorate on somatics and tantra, but going back to 8th century texts and recovering a feminist view of it all. And it was a very communal work. Our team was really great, and her friendships who supported her, and she and me and another friend all had babies and grandbabies during this process. And so there was a real camaraderie about it, and all came out yesterday. It was such a great dissertation defense because we were all interactive and participating in really meaningful things. And it wasn't just kind of her being a star or anything.
So I'd like to make a link between some of the things we've been talking about. So you're known for systems work as well as the developmental and other pieces, different body systems. I was prepared for this interview. I was meditating this morning, muscles, bones, rather than body parts. I was doing a sort of BMC type meditation this morning, and it's different. I definitely feel different than when I'm in a yoga class which is fascially orientated compared to one which is more bone or more muscular. You have different teachers and they orientate around different systems. And you've also got just the richest background of practice. Like if I had to name someone in the world who has mapped through experience, not just cognitively like I do, but through experience, different embodiment practices. Like for example, I know your Aikido background is incredibly rich with incredibly good teachers, and that's just the one that I personally know, and there's all these others. And you've integrated that in a truly integrative practice. And I think very few people have achieved that because it's an absurd amount of work to study all the things you've studied. And then, Don, you've been at the kind of epicenter of the somatic renaissance starting in the 60s and Esalen and California and San Francisco, and you know all these great people, some of whom are now passed, like Emily Conrad, or talking about Michael Murphy earlier. These are huge names that have come together in the West. This meeting of psychotherapy and Eastern practices particularly. And then me in the conference, this is the 21st century coming together of, we have 10 different tracks on the conference, and there's people from all around the world, most international thing you could imagine, and people who couldn't afford to fly out to an intensive in California, and so many different kinds of practices. And last conference, people were saying, I didn't know I was an embodiment person. I didn't know there was a name for it. And I just said, well, that's one name and it's one umbrella term. And this coming together in the 21st century in another way. So I've seen you do it in your own practice. And John, you've been a part of this scene in this epicenter. And now it's happening in a kind of 21st century online way. So talk about community and the importance of community and systems. There's where I go with that. Any response to that?
Bravo, wonderful, amen. This is just the natural way of each person and then each generation holding the space, which I read in your book is not a phrase that you naturally use, but I use quite a bit. Hold our own space. So one of the feelings that I have held, or dreams, or a dream with roots, is that wherever, for example, body-mind centering, wherever it would, in whomever, it's about embodiment. It's somebody said, what is body-mind centering? And the best thing I could think of was whatever works is fine. Well, I'll say now that we have programs in 18, I think, countries, something like that. And the vision wasn't 18, 19, 2, but wherever it would be in the culture of its own self.
Mm.
So theoretically, I'm still the, I don't know, CEO, director, or something. I signed the certificate.
Uh-huh.
I'm still writing study guides occasionally, and what else?
So somehow CEO seems incredibly inappropriate, but it just doesn't fit.
Well, I don't know
somehow.
what CEO means in the word. So
Chief
maybe,
Executive Officer, like the head.
well, I just mean that I'm still, let's say
Sure.
that my name is still at the top. Educational director, I think, is the term. But I have nothing to do with the day-to-day transmission. It's all local. And Gloria Desideri, just yesterday I got the new book in Italian. They did another edition and they changed, and it's different. They put different things on different pages. So is that legal in a way to take a book and translate it and turn it around? Yes. Because now the book was originally in the 80s. 21st century, it's 21st century book. And the one in Brazil is orange in the color. It's got a lot of orange in it.
Cover of my book's in Brazilian, in Portuguese, and orange too. I guess.
Yeah.
A bit of vibrancy, bit
Yeah,
of colour.
right, right.
Yeah, it's
South
Brazilian.
America.
It's not
Yeah.
coming out of Massachusetts and New England. So there's something about, also at the beginning of a class often, depending on how long the workshop or how many people, to have everyone stand. So I have to do it. And hear your name. Take your space. Bonnie. Bonnie. Let everybody hear. Absorb. And then sit down. And then look at the next person. And for some people it would be like, oh my God, we're going to waste all of this time
Right.
with people saying
Wasting
their names,
time, right.
which we're not going to remember anyway.
Right.
And someone else says, oh my God, I can't do this. They're going to not hear one name because they're so worried about what they're going to say. And then when they finish, they're like, oh, thank God. And then they're
Check out.
resting because they said their name. And some people will come late to class if they know that that's the class I'm going to do it, so that they don't have to do it. And I'm getting quite strict about it. And someone said,
I had the same experience, doing the same thing, with the same results. It's very instructive.
And it's the idea to actually just be really present to each other, that hey, this is the important stuff. This isn't the warm-up before the class.
That's right.
This is
Right.
being
This is the
seen
highlight
and
of
being
the
named and
class.
being present, and this is it. This is the highlight. This is the center.
and I just am doing this once a month, just 3 hours on a Sunday for 9 months. And it was only on the 6th class that I asked people to stand and say their name. Because 3 hours, if you did it the first class, the class would be over. But usually it's the first. It could be the second. Once I did it over a 6-week period. We were there 5 days a week, 6 days. 5 days, 6 weeks, 7 weeks. And had just so many each day. But then the poor people who were at the end, they were like suffering for several weeks. But it's also getting easier for the people who come back. And even the people who don't come back, because more people are getting more comfortable, more people are getting comfortable who haven't been there.
I want to embellish a little bit on your 21st century thing, because a couple of things. What struck me, that led me to a lot of this stuff we've all done together, is when I was training at Esalen in the 60s with Ida, what I noticed was we would go with Ida and she would say, don't have anything to do with all these other people. And Feldenkrais was there and he would say, don't have anything to do with these other people. And they were all these groups But in the dining room, everybody talked with each other.
Yep.
All the people talked with each other. And we found out they were doing fascinating things in these other groups, even though the teachers were sitting in their corners not wanting to talk to the other people. So I thought that model of going to Esalen, and I was so blessed. I mean, I'm so grateful to Michael Murphy, who kind of gave me Esalen over the last 50 years to do what I wanted to do. It was a great gift. To bring people to live together in the big house, where they were all of the stars were there, living together, eating together, standing in line to the bathroom. It created an environment, and it seems to me you're doing this in the web.
Yeah.
So you're extending that realm where people are talking together. And just a footnote on that. So, did you go to Italy with us? To Camaldoli? I can't remember.
I went to, I don't think
Where
I
we all went to Italy. We went to Rome and stuff. So
no,
I
didn't go there. I went to Austria with you.
Oh, to Austria, yeah. No. So I got a grant from Lawrence Rockefeller to do this project on the body and spirituality. And part of it, we took our whole group to Tuscany, to the old Camaldoli monastery up above Arezzo. And the spirituality of the Benedictines, their fundamental spirituality is hospitality. And I thought that, and Michael Murphy always says that what makes Esalen work is seeing that the meals are served and the house is clean. And so this business of getting a platform so that people can get beyond their divisions and get beyond their ego shit. I guess I shouldn't say those things.
That's fine. My audience, that's really not a problem.
That what you're doing is in a much bigger way. That kind of thing where throwing people together and saying, work it out here. This is what's going on, and giving them a place where they can really not be so defensive.
I definitely see a shift happening in the embodiment world in the 20 years I've been involved. Less siloed, people having more wanting those cafeteria conversations. And now, because of the internet, so much more is available. So a young yoga teacher has probably downloaded some Feldenkrais lessons, has seen an Aikido clip, has tried meditation that they've got an app on their phone. So that naturally the divisions are breaking down anyway, and people are much more eclectic in their practice. So that's just the context.
And the danger, of course, is
and
the Facebook danger.
That comes out in a bit. Yeah.
The Facebook danger. I've stopped. I know one of my neighbors, one of the founders of Facebook. We have this huge argument, but I will not have anything to do with Facebook.
Let me jump in on that, because what we've found with the conference is actually incredibly welcoming, hospitable environment, and the social media environment of the conference is actually incredibly warm. There's very little of the normal problems, which I really hear you do exist with social media. Like in the run up to this interview, the conversation was beautiful about you and your work. It was a lovely conversation and lots of people contributing. So it is possible, and sometimes it's little things, like a decision we made with the last conference was to, we have these Zoom, generally they're not pre-recorded like this, they're Zoom live things, and at the end of every one we opened up the Zoom groups, and there's a feature where people go into breakout groups. So you press a button and it just allocates people into little rooms of 5 people. So there might be 1,000 people on the call, but all of a sudden you're in a room with 5 people. And they could be from Sweden or Japan or Brazil. And we did this, we call it the coffee break. So after each session they had this chance to just connect, where there wasn't a teacher, where there wasn't even and people said, hey, how was that? How did you find your session with Don Hanlon? What did you get from it? And people would chat, and people said that was their favourite bit of the whole conference. Their favourite bit wasn't the really important teachers and the wonderful learnings and the great tools, and they liked that, but what they really liked was being thrown into an online space with 5 strangers that they had something in common with.
That's a really important thing you're saying.
And that random community, I think this year we're doing it both with that, but also because it's so big, we're allocating people little groups they can be with and talk with if they want. Like you have like a table at the cafeteria kind of thing. So it does feel like, on the one hand, we have this huge possibility with the current technology, and it can be free. It's difficult to afford a course at Esalen or
Yeah.
places equivalent in England
Yeah.
or Germany, you know.
Yeah.
And they can do it from home if they're a carer, if they're physically find it difficult to
Yeah.
get out of the house, if they emotionally,
Yeah.
they can just, if they don't like being looked at, they can turn their camera off
Yeah.
and they feel safe.
Yeah.
So this is
Yeah.
a different possibility.
Yeah, it's
but I hear
really
you.
great.
There's also a different there's a different danger which I do want to come to as well. Actually,
Yeah.
Because I don't use the computer, I have not been online that way. I don't know really what you're saying.
okay. In terms of how it feels or looks,
If you
or-
have thousands of people watching and listening, participating, how do they have 5 in a room?
great. So the way it works is
5 in a virtual room. It's not a real room.
Yeah, but still, if you divide 5 into however many thousand,
Yeah.
that's a lot of virtual rooms.
Yeah, and the system's all doing that behind the. So you're watching a screen, and you maybe Don's teaching, and you can see that 1,000 people are watching, and you can see their little screens. You know, if you want to look at them, you can.
You mean the person teaching sees the 5,000 people?
You can.
They can flick, and there'll be a screen, maybe 25 on a screen, but they could flick through if they
Oh,
wanted.
interesting.
And then we press a button, and all of a sudden, instead of being Don on your screen, it's 5 people. So 5 little boxes of different people.
So you don't know who those 5 people are before you press the button?
You can organise it, but we like to do it randomly. We like to just have it like
Oh,
like you
great.
would in the queue for the cafeteria at Esalen, right? Like you don't know
So
who's coming
different
in.
countries or in background. That's great.
It is really great.
It's really
'Cause I'm doing a small version of this on my online doctorate program. It's taken me a year to do it right, where you get the richness of that particular medium in contrast to others.
But you didn't have to do the.
I don't do it with 1,000, but I do it with 20.
I mean, you actually.
Or they're in
set it up.
Shanghai, Moscow.
You can set that up, or you have
Yeah.
someone else do it.
Well, I've been helped a lot. We have a team at CIS that helps us do this. But
I'm impressed.
yeah, I'm impressed too that I finally mastered it just in the last few weeks actually. But I have people in Johannesburg and Moscow and Shanghai. And, it's amazing. It's much smaller than this, but
It's cool.
it's
though,
a small version of what he's doing.
How wonderful.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
So are you sitting in front of a computer, or do you have a camera?
I sit in front of my desktop computer. Yeah, it's got a built-in camera.
I have a really big computer, so I can like this big, so I can see all the different faces.
Yeah.
So, and
Like I had this woman from Shanghai the other day. She's living in Shanghai. She took her camera, her computer outside on her porch and showed me the empty streets of Shanghai.
Yeah.
Because of the plague. Yeah, and so we have this thing going that's just, it's great.
people could be anywhere.
It could be anywhere.
I saw some people in a car escaping a tornado.
Wow.
And literally,
Yeah.
you could see them driving, and behind them was a tornado.
But
Other
now
times
the thing is,
Why were they on the screen at that moment?
They just wanted something to entertain them, I guess, distract them. From
but the
fact
thing
that
is,
they were running
the
away
thing is
from
most
the tornado.
exciting to me that I wondered about. So the issue comes up as probably with you big time about how do you do experiential work?
Yeah.
Well, I found a way to do this, so I give them instruction, and it's amazing how they're doing such great experiential
Did you give
work.
me an instruction such as?
Well, to me, it's forced me to think differently about it all. So what the instruction I've been trying out in the last few weeks is, notice when something really grabs your attention centrally during your actual day, and really stay with that instead of just dropping it. So stay with it for a while, see what unfolds, and write about it. So it's amazing the things they're coming up with, like the tornado stuff, the Shanghai thing. So they're going through these fresh openings to some intense experience that's quite meaningful.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah,
The slightly strange thing is everyone's in a different time and place.
that's right.
So some people
Which
it's
makes it
nighttime,
hard,
They're
actually.
tuning in from Australia. 'Cause
Yeah.
it feels you don't have
Yeah.
like right now we have a shared place.
You have what?
A shared place. We're in a shared
In
physical
a house with a time, we all in the
environment.
same time zone. Yeah.
My brain's more or less in the Californian time zone.
Yeah,
You know,
more or less.
compared to jet lag, but
Yesterday, yeah.
yeah, but we have a shared context, so it's like our embodiment has a shared level substrate or floor that we're all on. Whereas in this context, you don't. Someone is in their house breastfeeding,
Yeah.
Someone else is on the other side of the world waking up.
Yeah.
Someone else is just going to bed in Bali.
Yeah.
So could they not do it at the same time? Is it something that they could wait till a more appropriate
There
time?
is on my platform, I'm sure yours too, there is a platform where you can do it at your own. You can interact, but the interaction's not in real time.
But then you wouldn't be able to do this 5-person.
It's not live. It's not live.
Right.
So that's the trade-off. And there are trade-offs. Like you can't touch is obviously the big one, right? Like I couldn't have had that experience I had with you at your workshop because you couldn't have touched me.
Right.
You can lead and demonstrate, and we can do things together and breathe together and wonderful things like that. And there is this other side to this technological world, and I think it's worth saying both sides. Now we've been enthusiastic about it.
Yeah.
There's this other side too. And I had an interview with you where you said you'd seen people's change, like people's nervous systems over the years. Like there is a way in which we're being wired differently. And as people who have done this work, both of you for a long time, have you seen changes in the way we're embodied, wired, put together, that may be a result of the increasing technology use?
Well, I think I'm worried about it actually. I think that there's a level of superficiality and ahistoricism that's a lack of any knowledge about history of any kind. History of about 20 years ago. That's very dangerous right now. I think the Trump phenomenon, this resurgence of totalitarian leaders around the world, the anti-science and the world, are reflections to me of a certain surface level.
Mm-hmm. So surface interest. And interestingly, in the embodiment world, it seems to be more pro-science than ever, more neuroscience and this.
But in a kind of wannabe world, in a wannabe way, like all of our science. We had a lot of scientists involved with us who were really serious scientists, who worked at science. And I think a lot of the interest in science and somatics is wanting to verify what I think I already know.
Justify, right, yeah. I have an opinion.
It's justification rather than exploration.
Yeah, I definally see that.
Science like when you think of Martha Herbert and George and Gage and all those people, they were just so serious like you are about really investigating and not trying to prove something.
It's an authority claim a lot.
It's an authority claim, right?
Yeah.
And I think the anti-science world is horrible right now. The anti-science climate is terrible. The anti-real science thing is.
What have you seen changes?
I feel there are changes, and then there are not changes. It's the viewpoint, and they're not good or bad, they're different. I'm grateful that I grew up in a pre-television age. My aunt used to say she was glad that she grew up before my age, right?
Yeah, I'd say I'm glad I grew up before internet.
Right. So it's a perspective. There's so many differences. I remember when Sesame Street first came, and this quick changing of screens or of attention. And one teacher said, I'm having trouble teaching now because I can't entertain the kids. Right. And to have this sense of that you're just in this moment and it leads to another one rather than it changes.
Okay.
It just
like MTV, I've heard people talk about. It's got da 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 da.
Yes, and how. So I'm hearing it from other friends. A friend who is an architect and taught also in England. You had a very famous woman architect there he worked with. And he said that the students today don't know how to draw. Like if they want to build a house, they just put in the dimensions and the computer does the work, where they used to have to figure things out. And or someone else said they were teaching at higher, again, college level, and because you can just go to Google, they didn't know how for example, to, and I have to trying to remember the word, outline. Like this is the main thing, and this falls under that, and this falls under, everything had equal value. They didn't, the students were not showing the weight of things. This is lighter, has more weight. And this actually fits under this, rather than that they just, you want the information, you just write that in, you get it. There was this having to be inside to figure it out instead of being on the outside to figure it out, or how to be bored.
Right.
Right.
Not to be constantly entertained. Yeah. Like if it's 2 minutes, I just pick.
I was, one of the weirdest conferences I ever been at Esalen was last year. 20 bloggers from China who had psychology blogs came to Esalen for a week. And each of them had like millions of correspondence. And they were all, nobody was over 30. And they were all doing advice on how to deal with serious business, breakup of marriages, chronic depression, addiction. I thought, what's going on here? It's like, and they had these very kind of recipe-like formulas on their blogs about how you deal with alcoholism, how you deal with divorce, how you deal with terrible children, And I thought, this is really, this is like, what's his face, 1984. It was really kind of chilling.
Marshall McLuhan idea that every new technology leads to an erosion of a skill.
Interesting.
Fascinating idea that any technique, for example, when writing was invented, people could no longer remember epic poems. It really goes back very far.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about is, have you seen changes in people's body minds, like in their actual, are people easier to teach now? Are they harder? Is there things that people get easier now or don't get?
That was the other part of what I was going to say. Those things I've been hearing from other people who are in more academic situations. When it comes to the people that I meet, I'm impressed that there are a lot of young people coming. I'm really happy about that. And people older. But for a while it was mainly the community that I would meet were just getting older. I don't know how that was. And now all of a sudden more young people are infiltrating into the group.
I think one huge problem that's so different from our era is the economic world. See, I don't think I ever really seriously worried about money till I was in my 50s. I mean, my training for 3 months with Ida Rolf was $2,000 for 3 months, every day with her. You could go to Esalen and you could pay by just working in the kitchen. And, I worked with, Ida charged $25 a session. And, Emily charged nothing for her groups. And it was like, nothing cost much money, let alone housing.
Yeah.
So how you, like one of my best friends spent 30 years basically traveling around the world studying with teachers, supporting himself by smuggling, illegal smuggling. And, that it's just that kind of thing where you have the capacity to just learn is not so available anymore. So I think that confuses this question, because the question is, if people had more, didn't have this weight of rent and loans and the cost of trainings, they'd probably do a lot more. Like some of the most interesting people at CIS are getting degrees. They end up being program assistants and working back at the school again because they can't find jobs, because a lot of the university departments are closing around the university world. So
it's really important to me to mention the economics of the system we're in, whether it's yoga or body mind work. There is a reality out there for people which is pretty rough. I just come to San Francisco for the first time in a few years, and I was pretty shocked by the number of people I saw on the street here. And there are we live in nice environments, and often I'm in nice yoga studios, and it's like, it's worth remembering there's a different
Yeah, but I know a
reality.
lot of people in Mill Valley who do yoga and massage and all that stuff, and the rents are just horrendous.
Right.
They
All
have
the
to
big
just
cities,
struggle
yeah.
with the rents. I mean, it's horrible.
Yeah, there has to be a evolution of
Yeah.
housing.
Yeah.
It's really the main.
It's really serious. Yeah.
It's very serious. It's really, 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 really serious. We never had to worry about housing, and I
No.
didn't. I grew up poor, although I didn't know I was poor. It was
Yeah.
like everybody else in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
But I never, ever worried about housing.
Mm.
I paid,
Yeah, me
in
either.
New York, I paid $76.
Oh, London,
a
it's
month,
crazy. All the
right?
big cities are crazy.
And we're facing it now with the reason we all live together is because not people want it, our kids wanted to, but they
Yeah.
can't afford the rent. Yeah, that's something has to be done.
See, I think this Wilhelm Reich saw this coming.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean Wilhelm Reich said, when he went across the river or across the Danube and saw all the refugees, he said, we can't talk about human potential and good sex unless we handle their housing. All these 12 people living in a house, you're going to tell them to have good sex? I mean, the relationship between somatics and the social world seems to be a really important issue, let alone global warming. There's a whole other
Yeah,
destruction of the earth.
yeah.
One of the sort of almost jokes at the conference is someone said, "What's your goal as a business person or financially?" I said, "Well, if it does really, really, really well, not only will lots of people be helped for free, but I might finally be able to afford a deposit on a house in Brighton." And me and my wife, we have two incomes, and it's like I have to do something globally mega changing. That's a huge financial risk, just to do what my parents could do on a starter's teacher's salary.
That's right.
So
That's
something
right.
has changed.
Something's
since
really changed.
since
right.
my parents were, having me and my sister in the 60s.
Yeah.
Something has definitely shifted just economically
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
What do you think's the sort of wider? Let's say a little bit more about that.
Let me just say one little word about Ida Rolf that I've been thinking a lot about lately. She used to say to us a lot, people really misunderstand my work. I'm not interested in fixing people. I'm interested in creating a healthier planet. And I thought, well, because every day suffering people from all over the world are coming when she do these miracles and stuff. And so, what to me that frustration manifests is how hard it is because suffering is so horrible. And I'm so relieved when somebody relieves my suffering. Of course, that's the thing I'm going to go for, right? Whereas the other stuff falls by the wayside. It's hard to say, well, I just want my shoulders to stop hurting. So it's a real problem that somatics, I think, is caught in because it's so successful at fixing. Is how do we develop the community side of it? How do we develop the care for each other and the earth and all those other issues and the economy and
Bonnie?
I do have one more thing to say about the young people in the 21st century. People are the same. I think that maybe it's a thought, but a feeling too. That we're basically living the same lives over and over and over again through the millenniums. That we're getting food differently, housing differently. Some people, whatever. That we're basically the same wherever I feel that I've lived perhaps the very best time ever in the history of humankind. What I've been able to do, I don't know of any other time I could have done it, including today. It was just the right timing. Maybe that's true for each life. I think my granddaughter is 11. She's living in the best time of her life, whatever that path of destiny is. So the young people that come today are the same. They're young people. coming with the same questions. There's more global information, definitely. And the again, I'm reading your book. One of my favorite sayings is that the space holds the information. What the devil do you mean by that? Just you either feel it or you just say what the devil is that. So each culture, you mentioned the refugees, somebody in our families were refugees at whatever point. We're just at what generation from that, and the struggles of that, and how do we, that's a whole other story. I mean, how do we really hold that suffering, that global suffering? That the young people today are carrying different information, but inside we're all the same. But we might speak different languages, different cultures, different ages.
Well, you can say that in a meaningful way. A lot of people say that, and it is not a meaningful way. You can say that because you work so hard to see each of us individually. If somebody hasn't done that work, it becomes passing over, say, the problem of slavery, the problem of the Japanese settlements, the problem of Islam. It passes over so many things easily. So it's a dangerous teaching. And I think that you have to realize the work you've done to say that in a way that's meaningful.
I'm not sure I'm even following you, Don.
You can say, Mark and I are living a similar life because you can see so deeply into each of us. You're seeing the deep kind of cellular levels and all of that. And you're able to do that because you work so hard to get there. If somebody else could come in this room and say that, and it's bullshit. It's bullshit, and it's a defense against doing the work.
So, for example, I haven't had the same challenges, say, a woman's had growing up in the same time and place as me, and it's important for me to acknowledge that there is a difference, but then on a deeper level, there's also a sameness. Yeah. And
but to get to that deep level, it takes so much work that a lot of people have not done, and they're not willing to do.
Yeah. I think it's love.
Yeah, well, right, but
at that level, we're the same.
Yeah.
Maybe at the level of hate, we're different. I don't know that. No, I don't know that. But there's a level at which I feel the great religions, although I do say they're all male, the religions of this time are transmitted that way. Underneath are holding that. You can find it somewhere, the ones that have survived the centuries.
See, here's where we're getting to the depths of somatics. It's like, this requires a huge amount of work. Sensing my reactions to you, sensing the levels of my reactions to you, and kind of paying attention to what gets in the way, and letting that pass away. I mean, all the work we've done for so many years. It's not so easy to get there. It's not so easy. I remember Turnpaw once said in our little gathering before he became famous, he says, you don't get rid of the ego, it just wears itself out.
I had an amazing experience with him once because I used to teach at Naropa in the summers. Not long before he died.
Who's this, sorry, with who?
Trungpa
Rinpoche,
who founded Naropa. You know, every now and then he'd have this kind of, I'm going to say reception or something, you go by, you shake his hand or something. Yeah. And I went by to shake his hand, and I didn't feel anything but the hand. I couldn't find the person.
Really? Wow.
And as I'm saying it now, I looked, it was only a brief thing, but I took his hand, it was like I was holding a glove.
Really? Wow.
It was very strange.
Huh.
It says a lot about me. I don't know what it said about him, but he died not too much longer after that, and I went to his funeral at Carmicholing. He was a really interesting man. I was never his student because I'm not a very good student, and I'm an eternal student, but I'm not.
You're not a good student? I find that hard
I'm an
to believe.
excellent student, but not of anything.
Okay.
Because it takes me a long time to understand what is actually what is it? Because I have to find it before I know what it is. And they said at Carmicholing, it's outdoors, they put the fire. It had to be. This is my memory. They had to put the fire on before noon. And we were told that there would be 3 rings around the sun. Okay. So at some point, by the way, the day started out rainy, kind of overcast, and we were driving from Amherst to Vermont with Nancy Stark-Smith and Jens Johansson from Berlin. It was overcast, and so I'm saying, oh, it's a good day, because it was very well planned, and Rinpoches came from all over the world. And so I'm thinking, it was astrologically, well, the day got hotter and hotter, and so that I have never been on such a hot day in my life. I thought I was going to burn. They start the fire, and somebody says, there's a ring around the sun. I saw it. Goes on and on and on. I'm not looking at the third one. Sure enough, there were 3 rings around the sun at different times. And the fire's burning, and the sun was so hot. We were all outside. And then at one point, there was just the smallest breeze. It was just the smallest breeze. He's gone, let's go. So we headed down the hill, and we ended up being just behind the Rinpoches as they got up and left. It was so extraordinary. He wasn't I have no idea, but something. Something I experienced. Is it a metaphor? I didn't experience it as a metaphor. Really amazing.
Yeah, he was amazing.
So, but anyway.
One thing people were asking about on the Facebook group was current practices. So for people like yourselves who've been around the block, you've seen this come and go, you've seen that fashion, you've studied this thing in Japan and this thing elsewhere. What do you do now on a daily basis? What are your current practices?
Well, I find myself, partly out of really dealing with this 5 months of pneumonia that I had, I've done so many things for the last 50 years, and and I work with a trainer, so I do about an hour every morning, and I noticed that it's all become a seamless whole. I really like it. So and I can name the fabrics that went into it. So, like gyrotonic, qigong, Pilates, Tai Chi, Judith Aston patterning, light weightlifting. Probably left out something. So there are a bunch of fragments, and at this point in my life, I love the fact they don't seem at all like fragments, and they change organically from day to day, and I love that. And I also, cross-country skiing has been very important for me for the both for the practice of it and being out in the beauty of the winter in the mountains, and then hiking in the mountains. And,
Where do you ski?
On mostly at Royal Gorge. Do you know Royal Gorge? It's up on Donner Summit, and they have about 200 miles of groomed trails.
Is that near where you live, or do you have to travel?
No, we're on the summit of the Sierras, towards Lake Tahoe. It's up about 8,000 feet. Yeah.
Sounds glorious.
The trouble is that global warming is ruining the whole thing. It's the second year of drought, so luckily we've been able to have some good times until now. It's now getting all melting. So.
Yeah, where's the snow? Where's the rain?
Yeah, right.
This is our rainy season, and
Yeah.
it's not rainy.
Now
This
is
is
our
the
rainy
rainy
season, yeah. And
Wow.
it's serious drought.
I've just heard from friends in Moscow saying they've had the sort of mildest winter ever, and things are changing for sure.
Yeah. So anyhow, that's I've had to deal over the years with it's hard for me because of my joints to exercise without pain. So I've had to kind of move around that.
And now?
Well, I found a way to do that.
Your body daily practices, things you.
Oh, and then my wife and I have a really nice ritual we've done for 30 years. We have tea in the morning and meditate for about half hour.
How lovely.
With a
Yeah,
partner.
it's really nice. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
My wife and I have a little gratitude one where we say what we're grateful for before we get to bed.
Oh, nice.
It's become sort of part of our relationship as well as part of our practice.
Nice.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know if I can name. If I say if I put it in words, it sounds pretty corny. And corny is not a word people say anymore. I'm just living my life,
Okay.
and I'm always, I'm living my life. Meeting what's coming. And I do have rituals, for example, your beautiful socks. I still have a lot of range and stuff. And for the most part, don't have pain. At different times, certainly, but generally, I feel I'm physical. I'm always physical. And I still do my little turns to...
Little turns. Sweeping leaves off the porch. That's how I met you this morning.
I actually have been surprised at the few times when you erupt into your strength and movement. You don't see it until she does it. It's pretty awesome. Her dance background and this enormous strength of your voice also. That time I reminded you of when you screamed at Esalen. Quite impressive.
Yeah, I'm embodied.
You are embodied. Yeah.
Embodied.
Yeah, I
You
feel
could throw him right out the window if you wanted to.
I could lift you. Shall I do it?
Let's go for
Let's
it.
see. Think that way. So, let's see.
There it is.
That's a nice uplift feeling. Thank you, buddy. It's giving me a bit sort of slightly tired, jet lag brain, a bit of a wake up.
Yeah, you didn't say anything about Paul Hawkins and stuff when you were all there dancing.
Yeah, so when you asked, do you want to get that or just leave it? I see myself as a movement artist first. That's my passion in a way. Not as a performer, so usually people would say, I am a dancer,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm dancing in my life. rather than it's another activity.
Right. And this is a theme I've interviewed maybe nearly 300 people for the podcast, and the more senior ones that have been at this a while, it seems to integrate more, both as a practice, like you were saying, Don, like even now, like my morning practice now after 20 years, I'm not sure if it's sort of Tai Chi, it's sort of yoga, it's sort of, Feldenkrais, and also increasingly into their
Feldenkrais, right? Feldenkrais, that's better.
The other piece,
Yeah.
And increasingly into their life, where it's like, this sort of old Christian thing of the life becomes the prayer. The embodiment becomes, it's not like, well, this little section over here, now I am in yoga with my special yoga clothes, or, it becomes much more diffuse and integrated. So it becomes a kind of a weird question. You say, like, what's your practice? But you say, without being corny, the answer becomes, well, eating.
But I do have to say, I used to hold that, but then when I fell off the cliff, and then when I had the pneumonia, I realized if I didn't really do a practice,
Right.
I would fall by the wayside. So it called me to really giving for myself at least, because of the entropy and all that aging. That it was dangerous for me to hold that.
Right.
That kind of everyday
Makes
activity is enough.
Makes sense. I always keep a solid sitting meditation practice, because I'm just healthier with it.
No, I think for me it's crucial. I learned the hard way. It's crucial to keep up with that because of aging. I think a lot of it.
Yeah, I moved because of aging also.
Yeah.
But I did it anyway before I was aging. And the research part, for example, 2 years ago I had cataract surgery, which changed my life. I was going blind, literally, and I could see. Then last week I had for secondary cataracts another procedure, because the sludge or whatever the cataract is was developing on the back of the wall of the capsule. And they put a hole in it, and it's not something, well, that my research mind goes, well, what happens when the fluid, the gel behind the lens, is in touch with the lens? So on the other hand, I would lose my vision if it's a continuous thing. So then backtrack to early 1966, so that's 54 years ago. I found a book by Bates on improving vision.
Oh.
Then go back to when I was 10, and then go back earlier. I grew up in the circus, so I grew up in this tent, this enormous tent, 3 rings, people flying in the air, on the ground, quick things going. I had incredible vision, and I used to brag. I'm so glad I bragged, because otherwise I wouldn't know that I had such good vision. So at 10, I broke my arm. Within a year, I had very poor vision when I lost the use of this hand. Literally lost the use. I couldn't use it for 2 years. And fast forward, I felt when I started to look at Bates that what was this relationship? Well, I always kind of wondered, and when I broke it, I was playing basketball and fell and broke it. My elbow was going this way and my forearm was going this way. So among other things, the adults around me were rather hysterical, which meant that I was taking care of the adults around me, which was a factor. And I've gone back emotionally and different ways of what did I feel in that situation. And among other things, I didn't cry. Other people were crying, passing out. And then later I had different surgeries, and when they went to go take the stitches out, I started to tear up, and the doctor said, "You've been so brave all along." And there are other stories about just holding it together. And so then we go to the Bates, and I tried everything that I could, and embodiment. I went to the retina, the cornea, the lens, the ciliary muscles, the extraocular muscles, how it works in the brain, the geniculate bodies, the colliculi. And there was a tension in my eyes that I never could seem to release, except I think once or twice I felt the release, and that I was looking through my eyes instead of from my eyes. But meanwhile, when I had the surgery, I was 9.5 diopters, which is pretty nearsighted. On the other hand, I even went without glasses, living in Amsterdam for 10 years in my 20s. Not 10 years, a year.
I was wondering that. I thought 10 years. You know, 10 years. I thought 10 years could not have been right.
In Amsterdam?
Yeah.
No, yeah, it was 1 year, but I got the 10-year-old switch. Sometimes I don't say my mouth bladders without my brain. But so I felt that I was looking through. It was a window that I could look through my eyes instead of from them. But I also had superior near sight, so that I could read smaller things than even most people could read. So I kept looking at that, and I thought, well, internal, maybe my eyes are this way because I'm doing so much internal work. How do I move out? And you helped to bring me out, by the way. So I had this cataract surgery. I had 20/25 vision, incredible. But my brain didn't know really how to deal with all this information. I still was looking as though my brain was still working as though I had this other thing. And little by little, I keep going, come on. Anyway, so Thursday, the doctor put a hole in my right capsule of the lens. Thursday, a few days ago. And the tension left my eyes. So I noticed, and I thought, oh my God, the capsule has to be elastic for the lens to lengthen and get thinner in order for distance, and it needs to get shorter.
Oh, right.
It's guiding the lens. I never thought about that. 54 years later. So I would go to my left eye, it has this tension. I said, without words, what if you let go? Tension gone. Wow. 54 years later.
Wow.
So that's another case where I don't want to waste the suffering. Maybe it'll help somebody else. So I've shared it with several people, and my brain knows better how to process what I'm seeing.
Wow.
So I thought, gee, maybe that'll help someone to actually not get so nearsighted or farsighted. So then I thought, with aging, people have to start using glasses for reading, and I thought, oh, the tone of the capsule must get too lax. And so then I found this breathing. Everything has a breath. Not necessarily the same breath as the respiratory breath. Whether it's CSF or whatever, there's this is the breath of the capsule that holds the lens.
Wow.
Isn't that incredible?
It is incredible, yeah.
So that's part of my practice, as well as, I'm always fully exercised, releasing my spine or getting my leg up to the whatever.
Are there any kind of modern practices or things either of you have seen come in recently that have excited you or piqued your curiosity at all?
Well, when I moved here 11 years ago, I became very close friends with the director of ballet at ODC in San Francisco. We became really good friends, and I just went to her memorial a couple of weeks ago. But I got back into ballet, which was a very early.
Wow.
And so I'm now hooked into the ballet scene.
Oh, wow.
Not doing it so much. We had some of the teachers would come here. For several years we would. That's not quite a new thing, but I had left ballet because my main mentor was Eric Hawkins, modern dance.
And there is almost a story of somatic practice coming out of ballet and rejecting ballet.
Yes.
And a lot of the people I train with, like, well, I started with ballet, but then I realized, that was too hard on my body, and it was a bit, disembodied, and then I moved to there's a way in which there's it's almost a poetry to hear about you coming back to ballet in your 70s, when that's been the thing that so much embodiment has come out of rejecting.
It's kind of like yoga, really. It's how you do it.
Right.
And it's lasted a long time because it has intelligence. I was teaching at the Beijing Dance Academy a few years ago, and they're like based on the Russian, extraordinary dancers, and yet I had something to offer, and they were so excited by the somatic approach. And I was so excited by what they could then do with it.
We were talking earlier how yoga's opened up to the somatic approach in the last few years, that I've really seen the yoga world become so much more open to somatic in the States, in Berlin, particularly on the lead edge of the sort of yoga communities. And what a wonderful thing that is, that this thing that's very mainstream and widespread has kind of opened up, and maybe dance would be another one.
Yeah, so I'm excited by that. I'm excited to reclaim something that I loved as a kid. If I had blood in my toe shoes, I thought that was great. I thought, oh, I'm really doing it. And so now, because of my friend Augusta Moore, who already was a Feldenkrais practitioner and working in the ballet field here, she's really brought somatics to ballet in San Francisco and the Bay Area. And
so there's a full circle there, and I know, for example, the Place in London and different dance schools, somatics is kind of fairly commonplace in those now. I'm wondering if we'll go back to the circus next, Bonnie. There seems to be a sort of full circle loop happening here. I know some gymnasts that would love to work with you.
I did work some with gymnasts years ago. I was interested in which patterns would help them to accomplish something, which patterns prevent it. I was 15 when the Big Top closed, and the circus went indoors. My father, that's when he left. They had divorced, so my mother had left before. And I wept bitterly. And I went back once to the indoor one. It just didn't work. I was there in the 40s and early 50s, mid-50s.
And I would be by the railroad in Sacramento waiting for the trains to come.
It was the entertainment in America. The circus was the entertainment. There was nothing could compare to it.
It was a big event of the year.
And the smell, and also as a young child, I was safe. I could be all by myself, and I knew I was in a tribe. I would be taken care of. No one could mess with me. I owned it,
Just strutting around the circus.
Although I identified more with the Walendas. I keep wondering if I have the right word now, because I read somewhere else where they were called the Alonzas, but I think it's the Walendas.
Walendas is what I remember.
Or the high wire.
The high wire.
I saw something else, because there's a picture in the Philadelphia newspaper. And there are the Walendas, but they called them the Alzanas. And then there's my father, mother, and I. In the picture next to them, the circus had arrived. And why they took, my father was a ticket seller at that point, why they put the lowly ticket seller family juxtaposition with the Walendas. But the old man, there was the original one man who founded the act, and his kids and their wives or husbands, I don't know I never knew who was who. But I always identified with the old man who walked underneath in case they should fall.
Mm-hmm.
And they eventually did. I wasn't there. But it was a part of who I am as I'm walking in case they fall. And I learned psychology. All the psychology I ever knew inside, I got from Emmett Kelly.
Oh, Emmett Kelly.
Emmett Kelly was the famous,
Clown.
the most famous clown, and he based it on the depression, the men in the depression, and the homelessness.
Yeah. Wow.
And I loved that man. And I can remember about 5 years old, I was sitting probably in the best seat in the house, because they could sit me there and then go off and do what they had to do. I was sitting there and always just, this was my world, this where people are willing to die daily for their art. And the band leader, I forget his name, 50 years, he never missed a show. Ladies and gentlemen,
That voice.
children of all ages, welcome to the greatest show on earth. The band would strike up, you know. It was incredible. And I was just this was my world.
I think we might use that 5-second clip to intro the whole conference on the internet, because this is the greatest circus on the planet. Right, you're in the big top of the 21st century now. You're in the big top. This is the Embodiment Conference online. You're in the circus. I think we're going to take that few second clip and play it right at the beginning of the conference. Bainbridge Cohen introduces the circus. You're back in the circus. What?
And I didn't finish.
Sorry, excuse me.
So then Emmett, he had this broom, he'd go sweeping the sawdust, and he had a cabbage. And I was like, 5 years old, sitting there just in that innocence. And he came over to me and he looked at me. He tore off a piece of his cabbage and he gave it to me.
Wow.
I didn't need any other psychology. I had others in college, but
What touched you about that? Was that it was simple?
he
it was giving
embodied all of the sadness. His son eventually took over when he died, but he wasn't the same. He really, he was Emmett Kelly. His son couldn't be Emmett. He had the name and he had the training and he had but the creator, we each have to have our own name. And I also was it's not fair to only say that, but he was the seed of it. And then I studied psychiatry, and part of my training in OT with Dr. Adolf Haas, who had been a concentration survivor and a psychiatrist, head of the psychiatric department at Ohio State University, and he was my teacher. And he was the one who, like we were watching Ingmar Bergman films and reading Kierkegaard and all of these other people, existential, how to live existentially. And he was the one who brought it up to the cortex. And there were others. I had a lot of psychology. Actually, not that much. Jung, Freud, and then I studied with Dr. Judith Kestenberg, who studied with Anna Freud.
Oh, Kestenberg.
She was a student of Anna Freud. And then the Carl Rogers. That was pretty much all that existed in the early 60s in the university. But Dr. Haas was, he and Emmett were, they survived the Holocaust. They survived the Depression.
Boy, let me ask you this. If you had 10 minutes to teach the world, the circus is in town, the cameras are on you, it's being broadcast across the world, what would you share if you had out of this huge career, this huge body of knowledge, what would you share if you had 10 minutes?
Are you comfortable?
That's what you'd ask.
Except what I mean by comfort isn't are you.
Okay.
Actually, you can go like that, it doesn't matter, but are you escaping your life? Are you comfortable? Are you comfortable in the places you can be comfortable? Because you could be in great pain, you can be in lots of problems, and so it's not like are you without pain. It's not comfort that has no pain, but are you here on your path of destiny, whatever that means? You wouldn't put that in yours. Are you living your life? My grandmother had a sign beside my bed. Whatever good that I may do, let me do it now, for I shall not pass this way again. All right, it's not like is it good or bad. See, anything that I would say can be lived or metaphor or rejected or just, hogwash. I just mean as, this is it. I once went out on a ledge, but before I left it, I thought about my life and I thought about what was the purpose of this? It was so much suffering. I didn't think I could bear, it wasn't my own suffering, I couldn't bear the suffering of the world.
So you went out on a ledge, meaning you went to the edge of a building?
I just sat on a ledge with the window, and it was open, and it was a story there, my feet over the edge. And I thought, well, why would I want to live? What? Just to see more suffering? I thought, first of all, it would kill my mother, and I didn't want to do that. And I thought, well, what if I learned to be happy? That's a possibility. Because I could always take my life, but I wanted to know, what was happiness? Was there such a thing? I remember my college teacher, because I was smart, in spite of the fact that I don't think so much I was smart. And I was friends with a girl named Polly. And the head of the department, right, she said, I'm so glad Polly's your friend. Because Polly was nice, easygoing girl, and I was pretty intense. And something in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, she's lucky to be my friend too. But it wasn't worded, but I knew there was something a little strange about that. And I thought, well, I would see what it was to be happy. So I put off taking my life to understand, is that a possibility in a world that's so really, so much suffering? So that's another possibility, is if you don't know happiness it's possible. It's possible. It's possible. And I found great joy by living and suffering. Why not? So be comfortable. That's what I mean by being comfortable. It's not your typical definition, and I'm not sure I defined it.